Two girls stand at the front of the classroom locked in a furious stare-down, their teeth gritted and tears stinging their cheeks. The other kids lean in, gripping the edges of their desks, eyes wide in anticipation. The first rule of Fight Club, barks the teacher, is we don't talk about Fight Club. She places a hand on each of the girls' shoulders, holding their gaze as she lays down the rules. No hair pulling, no screaming, no yelling. She pauses, letting the tension build, and no phones. This is just one of the utterly insane stories of the worst teachers in history and why they were banned from schools forever on today's episode of The Infographic Show. Number 10. School of Hard Knocks. We're not sure if the teacher actually called her Fight Club, but everything else we said actually happened. At 23, she wasn't teaching math, she was hosting gladiator games for 6th graders in Florida, and it got her fired in 2023. It seems this teacher, truly a role model, believed the best way to settle a middle school dispute was with fists. At least she had rules of engagement. These weren't brawls, they were civilized fights. Some of the parents eventually got hold of their kids' phones, and there were videos featuring her reading out the rules to the class before she pointed to the spot and gave the order to fight. She'd step in now and then, but mostly let 30 seconds of pure, unfiltered girl-on-girl chaos unfold. The kids later told the cops that if the fight ended in a tie, the teacher promised them there would be a rematch in the next class. The teacher was fired and charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. You'd think this kind of thing would be a one-off, but no! We're ashamed to report to you that in the same violent year of 2023, a 24-year-old teacher in Texas was also fired for running a middle school fight club. Yet again, it was a female teacher, and the students were girls. What can we say? Go girls! As for the next one, we guess some teachers sometimes forget where they are. Number 9. Nuclear fallout. If someone begins a story with the words deeply and inappropriate, you know it's going to be good. This brings us to our next teacher, a 5th grade educator in a Long Island middle school who was let go in 2023. She was teaching health studies when she came up with an assignment idea. She asked the students who they'd like to take to their fallout shelter in the event of a nuclear war. She gave them a pre-made list of possible companions that they'd have to live with, and this is the deeply inappropriate part. These kids, aged 10 or 11, were asked if they'd choose a 38-year-old retired prostitute or a cop with multiple charges of brutality pending against him. Then there was the pregnant teenager, and who could forget the ex-coke-addicted musician? The last option was Sean Diddy Combs. Alright, we might have made that one up. But he was certainly the kind of dude that could have made the list. Look, we're not exactly the guardians of classroom decency here, just because we run a YouTube channel, but surely these kids were not yet at the level of maturity to deal with this kind of adult-themed content. Okay, so what would you do if you found out your teacher was, in fact, a witch? And no, we don't mean a witch in the figurative sense. Number 8. Witch trial in Tucson. Believe it or not, in 1971, a teacher in Arizona was fired for being a witch. You heard that right, it was 1971, not 1571. Her name was Ann Stewart. She was a tenured teacher working in Tucson when her witchiness became the talk of the town. The actual story starts in 1969 when an expert on everything witchy gave a talk to students at Flowing Wells High School, where Stewart worked. During the talk, the expert discussed what witches look like. We have no idea where she got her information from, but she told the students your regular witch would have blonde hair, a widow's peak, either blue or green eyes, and a pointy left ear. Well, it just so happened that this was a pretty accurate description of the kids' English teacher, Miss Stewart. So when Stewart taught them the next time, they all pointed at her and screamed, "Witch!" Stewart didn't deny that she did indeed fit the description the kids had written in their books. She used it as an excuse to teach her students about the history of witchcraft, likely the Salem witch trials and the European witch hunts. Before you could say abracadabra, she was out of the job. The school board suspended Stewart for, quote, teaching about witchcraft and, quote, affecting students psychologically. The board later upheld the suspension, much to Miss Stewart's shock and dismay. Witch accusations? Seriously? Or was Miss Stewart more witchy than she let on? She took the case to the courts and won, but the school just refused to take her back. Miss Stewart hopped on her broomstick and vanished into the sunset, probably cursing them all on the way. From witches, now let's turn to their spiritual father, the devil. Number 7. Satan's School. There was a time in the USA when you could be accused of being in league with Satan for listening to certain heavy metal bands or playing that famously evil game Dungeons & Dragons. This very paranoid era of Lucifer-loving nerds was also known as the Satanic Panic. The 80s were a strange time. Thousands of people were accused of hurting children in demented satanic rituals. There were lurid stories of babies being sacrificed in candlelit basements owned by seemingly normal families. But out of 12,000 cases, a grand total of 0 were substantiated. One of those cases was the rather grisly and very expensive McMartin preschool trial, when a family-run operation of teachers in California were accused of going way beyond story time. Suffice it to say, their teaching days were soon over. These were shameful times indeed, but that doesn't mean the Satanic Panic is over. In 2023, around Halloween, a young male teacher at Mesa High School in Arizona dressed in devil horns and carried a pitchfork. As his students walked through the door, he greeted them with the words, "Hail Satan." Now, we're no judges of classroom comedy, but let's just say admin leave felt like a soft pass. One of the students' parents, a school board member, and a devout Christian said such devil-worshipping stuff should mean the teacher was fired and banned from teaching. We should also give a special mention to the evil female principal at Eden High School in Ontario, who in 2021 inspired parents to start a petition to get her fired. The principal was an unashamed fan of the metal band Iron Maiden, a group of British heavies who made the devil great again in the 1980s and are still rocking hard in 2024. She'd been seen doing the horns up gesture on Instagram, which a group of parents said was deeply concerning and perhaps showed her allegiance to satanic practices. She wasn't fired. The petition gained 500 signatures. However, over 23,000 people signed a counter petition to keep burns at the school. This next story is explosive. Number 6. The Denver Bomber. Everyone's favorite kind of teacher is the one who takes a few risks to spice things up a little bit. But leaving a fake bomb outside of your school could be said to be pushing too hard against the boundaries of acceptability. And that is exactly what a 42-year-old substitute teacher named Jennifer Gomez did in 2016. She left a note outside her Catholic elementary school on Denver's northwest side, and it said, "There's a bomb inside." Suffice it to say, her teaching days came to a crashing end. After admitting she'd left the note so the school would be closed and she would get the day off, she was charged with false reporting of explosives. Whatever happened to just asking for a vacation day? From a fake terrorist, let's now discuss teachers and fake news. Number 5. Classroom conspiracy theories. Imagine the scene. Mom, dad, brother, sister, they all sit around the dinner table, discussing what they did that day. It's the boy's turn. He tells his shocked parents that in history, he learned that the planes involved in 9/11 were a simulation. In geography, he studied the giant wall on the flat Earth. In science, he learned chemtrails are brain-rotting chemicals to keep the Brits blissfully unaware that the royal family are intergalactic reptile overlords. You might think this couldn't happen, but don't be too hasty. In 2022, the British media reported that a design and technology teacher at a high school was teaching his children that LGBTQ+ people were, quote, descended from the Antichrist, and Jews and Catholics were, quote, evil. When he was done with the devil, he taught his students that the earth was flat and the moon landing was faked. He subsequently was fired for gross misconduct. This guy was just one of many teachers who'd been fired for teaching conspiracies in classes all around the world, not to mention the hundreds fired for so-called war offenses. This next one should be a warning to teachers everywhere. Number 4. Little brothers and sisters are watching. Here is a short lesson for all you budding teachers out there. Kids have phones, and phones take videos, and videos end up on social media. And that is just what happened in 2023 at the prestigious Ballarat Clarendon College in Australia. An English teacher went full Christian Bale, unleashing a storm of F-bombs on her grade 12s over apparently atrocious assignments. If there was an Oscar for cursing, she'd be right up there. "Some effing appalling mistakes," she screamed at the class. "Absolute dog beep" was her very informal grade. Her teacherly advice for her kids was to sort that beep out. And to one of the unfortunate students, who we hope wasn't the sensitive type, "That sucks. Get rid of that. That beeps up your essay so bad." Now, this is Australia, where hardcore cursing is a national pastime, but to talk like that at an expensive private school, it was just too much. It's not surprising that this beepin' reckless teacher got her beep handed to her. It should also not be overlooked that you shouldn't let your political beliefs spill into your classroom, like this next teacher did. Number 3. The explosive activist. Teachers are human. They all have political beliefs, But screaming those beliefs at your students and calling their parents idiots might not be the best strategy for keeping your job. This case goes back to 2021. The school in question was Utah's Lehigh High School, and the class was chemistry. One of the kids had their phone secretly aimed at the teacher when she dropped the planned science lesson for a diatribe about former President Donald Trump. She didn't hold back when she described the former POTUS as a, quote, literal moron. It gets much better. She ranted about masks and vaccines and screamed about the state of certain American news media. All the while the kids were thinking, what is wrong with her? When one of her students said, this is a chemistry class, her response was, go tattle on me to the frickin' admin, they don't give a crap. But the best part of her rant was when she shouted, most of y'all parents are dumber than you. She followed this up with, you don't have to do everything your parents say and you don't have to believe everything your parents believe, because most likely you are smarter than them. Well, as you can imagine, the parents weren't exactly over the moon when they soon saw themselves being called idiots in the video the kids shared on social media. One of them told the media she was, quote, just shocked and upset and just mad. Teachers in Utah, under their code of teaching ethics, are not supposed to talk about personal beliefs in the classroom. So that's how you end a teaching career in 5 minutes. Now let's see how you end one in 5 seconds. Number 2. Violent movies. You can find a lot of stories of violence breaking out in American classrooms, but this one is special. It's so bad it makes you wonder about the hiring process in U.S. schools. It took place in 2024 when a 7-year-old student at an Indianapolis public school came home battered and bruised. He told his parents he'd been punched, slapped, and slammed to the floor, not by one student but by a gang of them. The part that shocked their parents the most was when the kid explained that the teacher was sitting back watching the beatdown. He said he'd cried out for help, so what did the teacher do? He pulled out his phone and started videoing while egging on the young perps to try harder. After the parents launched a civil lawsuit, the full extent of the teacher's dereliction of duty hit the media. It turned out that this teacher had allowed the other kids to beat him up on several occasions. News media said he encouraged and instigated these beatdowns, adding that the victim had special needs. In one of the videos the teacher had taken, the victim cried on the floor and the teacher could be heard saying, "That's right, you get him." At one point, the teacher asked the little thugs if they were content with their beatdown when he asked, "You guys done?" When the kid asked the other teachers for help, he said he was told he was demonically possessed and holy water needed to be poured on him to cure him of his evil. Seriously, America, that is one big WTF. But it doesn't even touch some of the depravity going on in certain classrooms in the rest of the world. Number 1. A parent's worst nightmare. For parents, your kid making it home from school alive should always be a top priority. Outside of the US, it doesn't always happen. Punishments can get very severe. A kid in Sumatra, Indonesia died after his teacher made him do 100 squat jumps because he hadn't memorized a part of the Bible. Things like this happen a lot in the world, so we'll just pick the worst one we can find from the time we started making the show. This took place in Ogun State, Nigeria, at Obada Grammar School, where a teacher had bought a new trash can for the classroom. One of the kids, with future activist vibes, joked that the money for this shiny new garbage repository had come out of funds meant for the children. It seems the teacher took this to heart. He really took it to heart. He made the kid do 162 frog jumps in a row, enough to trouble a professional athlete. But he didn't stop there. Despite corporal punishment being against regulations, he then gave the exhausted kid 24 strokes of the cane, and that is how a child doesn't make it home from school. R.I.P. Trash Can Kid. Sorry to finish up on such a sad note, so cheer yourself up with Hak Tua, how much money has she made? Or have a look at this.